And there's some good comments on and this is not meant to be a death by PowerPoint, but it's a very interesting process. So I can see there, do people change? People respond to change depending on how honest you respond back to the questions they ask. There is also bias in those questions, yeah. And you get things like rhetoric questions, right, that kind of lead. Now, people are incredible beings because they're continuously calculating. Can I trust? Can I engage? Can I be part of? And it's built and established over time. And a lot of it is subjectively calculated. So one needs to really think about what is important. But I just want to start this presentation off by saying, we speak about data-driven decision management, but today we're expanding on that and we're talking about data value-driven management and really what that has got to do from a people stakeholder perspective. Yeah. And Howard, I'm assuming that most of these good people have been on your previous webinar.
Oh, that's a good question, Christine. I don't know if everybody's aware of data value driven. We have been sharing it for about 6 weeks now. So, but if anyone would just like a refresh on that, I'm happy to give a 2-minute summary. My elevator speech is anyone keen on understanding that, or have you heard?
Hands up if you've heard about the data value driven management. Oh dear.
Nobody. Wow.
So Howard, I've got a slide. I'm not sure if it's the right one.
Okay.
Do you want to put up something?
Yes.
Do you want to put up something or should I? I've got this slide.
I don't have any of them open. There we go.
Is this the one? So this is just a quick. Okay.
So I'll give a quick insight to that. So this is what we found, and someone may have read my LinkedIn post about the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And what we're seeing specifically with the de-embark is that it's lovely in terms of it gives you all the knowledge areas and things like that. But lots of people ask me, Howard, how do I follow this? Do I have a sequence of steps that I need to take? Should I follow it in a clockwise thing? And that was one of the criticisms that some people had with the previous de-embark version, is they thought they should start at 12 o'clock and end at 11 o'clock. Unfortunately, data quality was at 11 o'clock. And that's one of the things that you have to get in quite early. So I must admit, I've been working on this for quite some time, and I never really had a recipe or a way of tackling the de-embark. And what we discovered when we started learning about and really digging into this compliance section that the NDMO in Saudi has, they force you to do a data realization framework. And in that data value realization, they talk about two things. What is going to generate revenue and what is going to reduce costs. You've got to be able to produce an assessment of that. And when you build data products, you have to build it according to this approach. So you can see on the slide where the DDR determines the commercial feasibility of the use case. And what we have noticed in the past is, yes, it's certainly something we do in big data and analytics. We break up use cases, stories, and things like that. But what we're not finding is that how do we do the linking to the business strategy, the digital strategy, what use cases are coming out of there, what use cases are in our data strategy, and then how do we run it through and start to help execute by domain. So after we've built our strategy, and we see that, oh, we got a possibility of generating revenue generation. We've chosen the use cases, 3 or 4. Now what do we do? And so we've said, and we'll talk about this in detail tomorrow, where we talk about data quality, to understand the state of the data set, then to do remediation, and that may be a data model, it may be reference data, it may be fixing the business rules. And once you've done that, and you've got the data set into a right level, we're saying that you could now add that to your data catalog, meaning that you have an asset in there that is trusted and reliable. And so it's almost that data veracity that Patrick was talking about yesterday. So there's this process of establishing the trust in the reliability of the data asset. That's when it's in your catalog, because that's when people can search from it. And then BIA should be, from a production point of view, should be taking the assets from the catalog. They can certainly look at the data lake and find out other data sets, but when it goes into production, those assets should be in the catalog. So that's a simple summary of this data value-driven process. So we were wanting to create value in the asset, going from data to information to knowledge to wisdom. We want to get that driven correctly. And the other one is we want to sequence our activities from a data management point of view to continually add value and contribute to the benefit of the data management and the data that we build. Is that?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. I think that background would be great. Also, perhaps we can put in the chat the link to that excellent webinar.
I will have to ask Debbie to do that. I don't have it on hand, but if Debbie's around, if you can put that link to the chat.
Excellent. So let me just go. So I'm taking this from a people perspective. And, you know, in life, we have decisions that we need to make. And I just, it's going to give away our age, or my age at least. But have any of you, show of hands, this is the original version of Alice in Wonderland and Judy Garland. Show of hands, who's seen an Alice in Wonderland? Only Caroline, okay. Awesome. Patrick, you smiling. I'm asking, you know, have you seen this version or the other version? The newer version?
No, I haven't.
You've got to see all versions because they're incredible. You know, Disney designed movies for education as well as, and this is a critical education point here, as well as entertainment. So I highly recommend it. After you've watched the webinar that Debbie's going to share the link to. But I'm just going to show you this, and we all enter crossroads in our lives when we need to make decisions. You won't be able to hear the sound because I have to share. Sorry.
You have to share your screen with sound, yes.
No, with sound, yeah. Can you hear now?
No.
Oh, damn. So sorry. Let me try again.
So share your screen, and then on the screen.
Okay. So now the point is really what turn do I take? And I think what we've realized on this journey is that the road is varied. And as you take one corner, you realize there's another corner. And that's really where we've got to with data. We've realized there are better ways of doing this, and the data value, you know, we've shifted from data-driven decision-making to data value decisions. And that is quite a mind shift from a people stakeholder engagement perspective. And why I say that is you've got stakeholders that have got different agendas. So really, what does business want? Business wants their job to be easier and they want to get the job done. Data has got compliance, governance, and they've got to get the data right so that it's valuable and it can be leveraged off. The problem is sometimes those agendas are seen as conflicting. And what we're looking at here is there's really, this continent was shared in that webinar, but I'm just taking it from a stakeholder perspective. In this bottom quadrant here, data is not impacting the business. So here, stakeholders, the business stakeholders predominantly, see it as a waste of time, not effective, a hindrance. When the data management is high and compliance is accurate, business sees it as a hindrance, a hassle, and a have to, but not really like to. And the problem there is as well is how would your comments about should I get my lawyers in? There's this whole fear about being exposed, and data does expose a lot of misdemeanors, unintentional, but so it's a threat, right? So stakeholders, especially when they're operating here and it's all about the data, lose the value and sense of what it can give them. If we look at the continent from a high value but low data, so led with value, DMO can't scale. So that means that it's limited, okay? Ideally, we want a win-win for both, okay? So how do we get this when we start thinking in context of stakeholders? And truly the question is, can all stakeholders win? Because there's a third stakeholder here, and that is the customer, the end receiver. So if you're a ministry, it's your clients. If it's a business, it's your clients. There's a win three here. So it's the business owners, the ND, the DMO, and your customers. And so we're striving for the top right hand. So the data management office, it's not just from a compliance point of view, and it's not all about the data. Here we're talking about true business value. Howard, I don't know if you want to add anything here.
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting journey where we actually had JG joining us, and he found the number of times that business run after value and they do things in Power BI and Excel, and then they just can't link everything and they can't get the data to talk to each other, and they start to slow down. And once or twice he's been called into those situations to help them unravel the sort of mess that they got into. The person doing it was, he put in a lot of effort and he did a lot of stuff, but he was missing some of the fundamentals that allowed the product to scale. So now they start having lots of cost reduction issues that we can apply to get the thing sorted out, but they just can't get it to get to that level. So there's no production engine that can actually deliver on this thing. And then we've also seen other cases where it's just everything's about compliance. You can't move, you can't do anything without, and people feel that data governance is just about auditing. And so this was the tension that both of us have been living in. JG lives most of the times where he's desperately trying to produce value and not bringing along the data quality and the metadata and all those sort of things, because that sometimes slows us down, especially for small companies. How does a small 5 business person do all the data management? They'll probably look at this and say, you're crazy. Can't do, won't do, and we'll just get on with it. But it does get a point where the data product cannot lift up and produce the results that it needs to produce.
Yeah. And I mean, for me, the other side of that equation is, I remember Howard projects we were on where the executives would say, if I could just get this report, I'll be very happy. But they're not even clear about what that report should be. They're not sure where the data comes from. They don't care. They just want the report. And then when the DMO is trying to offer value and starts focusing on that, it creates even a bigger problem, because you realize the data quality is missing. the sources aren't right, or all of those good things. So the journey, so when Alice hit the yellow brick road, she thought she was going to meet the Wizard of Oz, who was going to answer all her questions. If you know the story, that's not true. It brings her onto another journey where she's got to continuously make decisions in a direction that she needs to go. And a very insightful, so that webinar is identifying that on this journey, we are learning a lot more things, and it's about driving value to narrow your focus and prioritize value to business. Now, from a change management, a stakeholder engagement perspective, if we're going to get them excited about data, if we start talking about compliance, and which is important, okay, governance and compliance and all of that, we're going to lose them. But if we talk value, business value, how it's going to change their life, they're going to be in. And in the webinar, I think JG alluded to a point where business and IT were having a discussion. And first of all, it was the DMO telling them what was going on. And the next thing, they started talking to each other because they suddenly realized they had value and a conversation that was about, through engagement, they were going to move forward.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about. And especially with data, data is not a transactional thing. It's not, let's get our quality in row, let's get the governance going. It's about really understanding that the way people work, the way people engage, is, for it to be successful, has to be collaborative. So IT and business need to work together. Please, if there are any questions, just do a show of hands in that. Howard, did you see a question? Anything you want to add? Anybody?
I haven't seen a question. There's comments about how we get distracted with our data, but no direct question for you.
Okay, great. So if you're looking at a stakeholder map, we sometimes focus on the core project that's been tasked to drive data governance. What I've done here is I've said that I've shown a whole, who are the contributors, who would put input into data, who are the adopters, who would have to adopt the new way of work, who would have to adopt the maturity of data, and how it speaks about, from data, information, knowledge to wisdom. I'm going to get there. But how do we make that progression really happen? Because it's not an overnight, it's a process, right? It doesn't happen overnight. And these are generally the adopters. And there's also a very important stakeholder missing here, the customer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And they generally, sometimes the way the world is going with data, will pay for certain data. So it can be revenue generating. And so it would be great if we include them in this by really understanding what they would pay for from a revenue generation. I'll go back there now. Okay, so number one, we've identified, let's talk value. Okay. Let's not say that data will tell us where we need to focus. Let's look at value. Just quickly here, if I go here on the slide, how it's shared. What is value? There are three components of value. The one is the business capability, the business process opportunity, and revenue generator, what can generate revenue for us. With those three, we already now have a sense of where to focus and prioritize so that we can deliver value to business. And how do we find that? The only way we can find that is by proper engagement between all stakeholders, the DMO, business, thrashing out, and so we call this an ideation process, where we actually going to understand the best use cases to adopt and work through to deliver the best value. Howard, anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate on almost how revelation it was to hear the business people. And so just to the context, we're working in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has what they call a 2030 vision, that they have to transform the economy from oil to AI, data and AI. And so the Crown Prince is pushing them like crazy. You will be here in 2030. So it's really nice, as you couldn't get a better stakeholder than someone like the King and the Crown Prince to be able to say this is where we're going. So stakeholder wise, we got it from the top, but as Christine is saying, you can have people behind saying, oh, I'm not convinced about it. But anyway, and that was the one response when we started sharing with this and then asking questions like your privacy challenges, and the one business guy said, oh, shucks, I need to get a lawyer to answer this one properly. So he said, no, that's not what we're about, and we're here to improve the value. And it was, as Christine said, almost 20 minutes later where it said, oh, wow, finally, I can see how you're contributing and how you're helping me achieve some of my problems. And simplistically put, they're desperate to get data from a certain ministry. They've been told to find a leaf on a far tree, and they haven't been able to get that. And so they are desperate to get the right level of data so that they can make decisions quickly and promptly and well, and they just haven't been able to achieve that. So they spend time manually getting data from all over the place and trying to emulate the data that comes from the real ministry. So that's a use case that we got on, and it was amazing when they recognized that we could help them. They thought, fantastic, now we're willing to work with the DMO to achieve all of what we were putting down. So a lovely change in behavior and attitude from, oh shucks, maybe I'm not, you're gonna find me and you're gonna audit me, to, wow, you can actually add some value to my life.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. And that brings me to the next point. Behavior doesn't change overnight. There's got to be a reason, what's in it for me to change my thinking. And what Howard's referring to is an experiential base where they suddenly realized there was a difference. So it's very good that we have more engagement. This can only happen through engagement of the right people. So identifying the stakeholders, this slide that I have here, is no easy feat. We might have it in a nice, pretty picture, but we don't want people who've got time to be in this group. We want people who are decision makers, influencers, and directly responsible for the outcome of the results. Otherwise, we just have a crowd and we're not heading in the right direction. So if it's all about engagement, if we're changing behavior and it's about engaging because it's a process, how we do it is very important. Now, in the old days, this is a waterfall approach, the top, where you would spend 3 months designing a strategy and then you would slowly implement it over time. And only at the end of that 3-year cycle would you realize the value of what your strategy plan was, be it data strategy. That's not the way to go. What business has identified is if we're going to optimize and get behavior change as quickly as possible, we've got to think in an agile way. And this picture really clears it up for me. For every step of the process, there is a MVP, minimum viable product.
Right.
Yeah, minimum viable product, which means that there is something of value. You can see these little guys. I can use something in every iteration, unlike the old way. And this is what we're saying with data. Let's get the stakeholders engaged in a way that they are continuously experiencing value, and that value is amplified over time. So taking an agile approach is critical. If we take an agile approach, there's, for those of you, just a show of hands, who understands agile? Who's been exposed to Agile? Great. Okay, good. And would you, okay, good. So just to show, well, any comments on this new way of working for those of you that have been exposed to Agile? Anybody? You love it. You love Agile and you live it. Good.
Yeah, I have a comment, and I actually put it on my LinkedIn post on the last time, is that I do like Agile. It focuses us, it gets us to go down the right thing. But in some cases, I find Agile to make us hyper-focused or myopic. So it's good. I like it. But in some cases, we're so narrow in where the journey we're going to, we actually don't realize that there's a whole that is bigger than the sum of the parts. And so we can break it down very small and stuff like that, and we get into trouble. And this is sort of some of my experiences lately, is that, and so I've gone into certain ministries, and everyone's running really hard in their own siloed domain and getting the job done. And then when we look a lot higher up, we say, wow, there's a whole lot of stuff here that if you piece it together and synchronize it together, you can reduce your work by 30%. And sometimes we don't see the whole, and we just see the parts, and we're driving the parts, and we're not always getting the right answer.
And Howard, I would respond to that would, to me, indicate a serious lack of intercommunication within the company. There should be a product sponsor, and that product sponsor should have a vision of the product, and that vision, that overall vision, should be cascaded down to any team that's working on any function of that product. Because you may have release trains, you may be doing it in safe methodology, just standard Scrum. You could be doing extreme or pair programming, whatever agile methodology you're actually using. You have to have that communication, and each team has to have the understanding of that bigger picture of where do they fall in the puzzle.
So yes, and I agree with you. But let me give you two examples of where this becomes challenging. The first one is this compliance that I've been talking about. What a lot of people have done is, because it's such a wide set of knowledge areas, they've then brought in the top people in a certain area and said, okay, we want you to deliver compliance. That means do whatever it is to get the submission out and submit on time. So it's the 20th of November, and everyone's driving it, and they're sprinting, and they're doing things within a domain. And that's fine. When we ask them, well, how does this whole data management fit together? It's a case of, well, we're not sure. And we see that to an extent with DMBOK, where you've got all these knowledge areas, but it's someone sequencing and putting the whole picture together. You get people very specialized in data quality, very specialized in these areas that we know there's interrelationships, but we're not sure how to put it all together. And that's what got me thinking sometimes that I've been hyper-focused in some areas, and I didn't have the time to look across everything. So that was the scenario that I found that the Agile went into quickly, started trying to deliver and not have any major meetings and stuff like that, because they didn't really, they just had to produce the compliance document.
Yeah, and again, I would go back. That's a failure from an enterprise implementation standpoint. that they haven't communicated that.
So how many people know
And
how
whether
to actually express?
whether that deliverable is realistic as well. If they say, hey, I'm setting you this deadline to get this out, that may not be a realistic deadline for Agile, because you know, that's the whole point of Agile is we change, and
Yeah.
delivery
Agile,
dates are flexible.
Yeah, and compliance doesn't always have that flexibility approach to it.
Yeah.
I agree, and I've got a lot of background in compliance as well, so I can certainly relate to that.
And it's interesting because they have been dictated to, you will be compliant on the 20th of November 2022. There is no ifs and buts, and if you don't, then you start paying penalties. That's the rule. And
Right.
in a way, it's a nice thing. So they have nowhere to move. They have to get it out. And so they start applying these agile things of sprinting in teams and things like that. And then you look at it, so we're all very busy bees, but I think sometimes we're busy fools. I'm including myself in that.
Now, when you say compliance, you're talking the actual regulatory compliance part of it, right? You're not talking enterprise compliance to
No.
using Agile.
It's national regulatory compliance.
Okay, so that aspect, those actions, they're already being done, correct?
No,
There's
not
already an
necessarily.
established.
No, Adam. In some cases, we did a maturity assessment. They weren't doing any data architecture, data quality, metadata. They were basically brand new to the game. They got lots of challenges with their data. And so they were also coming from a brand new point. But Christine, I think we may be taking over. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want this to be an agile discussion, but I'd like to say thank you, Adam, for raising that. You're right. It's an organizational issue, and it's actually a maturity issue. And Howard, what you're raising is it's very real. I mean, agile is not the holy grail. But I'm saying for implementation, not just in an IT space, it's the best way to drive stakeholder engagement. This is the scaled agile, and it's freeware for anybody. They even acknowledge it. So you don't have those kind of systemic problems, Howard, when you work at a portfolio level, where epics are involved in architecture, because that links the whole ecosystem of external stakeholders. However, most organizations are still in the baby phase. So they're implementing on the ground, and they haven't got to large scale or portfolio yet. And then there's full. So it's a process, it's a maturity. And it's because most organizations that are operating in Agile are sitting on the essential level. They haven't taken it from a strategic perspective, program view level. They're still working on the ground at project level. And that's why we've got those problems. But just moving on, yeah?
Just something
Patrick?
to mention. Something I heard, as I understand, is if you're an IT development organization, it's easy to implement from the top down, let's say Agile. But let's say in the banking industry, then the management has to adapt the entire organization for, let's say, IT, and that doesn't happen easily. And I think the main thing about Agile is continuous development based on feedback to kind of perfect the system. And if that point is missed, it can be tricky. For instance, you can sprint out the waterfall methodology or something.
Yeah, in most organizations, Jacques, what I find is a hybrid. So they use waterfall for some things and they use Agile for others. But what is happening, and financial industry, I work a lot in the financial industry, insurance as well. Our number one insurance company, they're adopting it outside IT, and it's working very well. And to your point, they talk about business agility, which is really good, because if you go in here and you look at lean agile, sorry, not the leadership, But if you go in, they talk about overview, it's continuous learning. There's a certain ethos. So these are 7 key pillars that drive the maturity of Agile. That can be a conversation for another time. Why I brought it in here was just to say, if we are going to drive value, we have to have lots of stakeholder engagement between business, IT, customers even, and that will optimize, and the Agile is the way to go. And why I say that this is on a very simplistic level. If you look at the Agile process, and this is just standard, for those of you that know, I'm just quickly going to explain to those that don't. It works in increments and sprints. Sprints can vary anything from 2 to 4 weeks, where then it gets revisited to go, are we on track? Should there be a feature that should change? Or do we bring something forward from the backlog? Or and then it gets to a point where there is finished work. So the first part of what's been achieved, okay, because remember we've said that every step has got value. So we've got this piece of work, it's got value now. Let's say it's a certain report, that's a subset of a larger report. But where is business involved in a sprint? Right in the beginning, where the user case is defined, at a critical sprint review, and right at the end in the retrospective. And what's really nice about Agile, the team just gets better, because in the sprint retrospective, all stakeholders start saying what went well, what didn't go well, and where should there be room for improvement. So a business stakeholder might say, you know, I get emails, but nobody comes and engages with me, and I don't have time to read 600 emails. I would prefer somebody to update me. It's going to create behavior change. Remember up front, I said, it's not, behavior doesn't happen overnight, it's a process. So this way of work drives a lot of success, because it's driving behavior change. It's building relationships. These little colored people are cross-functional team members. You've got your data specialist, you've got your change agent, you've got your technical expert, you've got your subject matter expert, and they are coming in and building the product together, sharing with their expertise. So now what you're getting is the best of the best building this. People aren't sitting in silos in isolation. The financial institution that I've just done a piece of work for, 2 years ago, they adopted Agile as their way of work. It's not without its challenges. Like I said, it's not the holy grail, but the results and the business feedback is very, very positive. And everybody went on the scaled Agile framework. So they've got Scrum Masters, professionals that they've now brought in, and it really works well. And why I'm such a big advocate of it for this piece of work is it will definitely deliver the results quickly, because they're engaging together for a common purpose. Remember up front, I also mentioned people are directly opposed. You know, one person's going in this direction. The business wants to get a report out. DMO wants compliance, and they are, you know, and they're worlds apart. But this brings it together towards a common goal, achieving a common result that benefits all parties. So I've got here win-win-win, a win for the business, a win for DMO, and a win for the external customer. Any questions before I move on to the next slide? Any comments?
Christine, I have a question.
Yes. Hi, Caroline.
Hi. So something that always kind of gets me with this sort of approach is we seem to constantly be talking about new things, you know, like we're delivering new features, new functionality, new value, new products. What happens with the ops side of DevOps? Like what happens with someone's got to keep the lights burning. Someone's got to make sure this thing is actually still delivering value a year later on deprecated infrastructure. Like, how do we cope with that culture of just make it work? When, you know, in the face of compliance, in the face of lots of change, and in the face of like people now splitting their world between development, which is super creative, and operations, which is, you know, keep the lights burning.
And Caroline, that is one of the challenges that they're having. So they've got business as usual, where systems are being maintained and having to be done. And then there's the sexy piece of work with innovation going into sprints and that. And all of a sudden there's a crisis with a business as usual system, and everybody has to drop and focus on that, and they're resentful. But like you say, you have to keep the lights on. And what takes priority? Of course, running the business. And there's that conflict. And also, when time is allocated in the sprints, when they do the PI planning, it creates a huge challenge because these people are booked. They don't have spare time for the crisis that business is bringing in now all of the sudden in the middle of a sprint. So
yeah, I tend to think we should stop calling it DevOps. I think we must call it DevOps. You know, it's like, oops, forgot about that. Oops, didn't write that down. Oops, forgot to share that information. Oops, I can't find it anymore, which creates the stress in an operations environment, right? So like you end up with a culture of constant stress. I mean, I'm hearing so many cases of IT people just burning out completely because they literally can't run that fast, and they don't have the operational backup. Like Agile's all well and good, but nobody writes anything down, and if you do, you don't share it.
So just on that, what we've experienced, because things are so fast, people have to work smart, okay? There's no time to take minutes of a meeting. And even if we did, nobody's going to read it. We don't have time. Also, recording sessions also takes time. So what we've done in this environment, and I've been a huge advocate of it, Microsoft have launched their whiteboard. Hands up anybody that knows about Microsoft Whiteboard. Or Maro. Okay, Patrick. Great. And do you use it, Caroline? You and Patrick, do you use Maro?
Yeah. Caroline actually gave a fantastic presentation this week on a practical one last week on using Maro board to collect business analysis requirements.
So that's
caveat on that. I'm also an information and knowledge management person, so I could see the limitations of it because you generate so much information during a project, but not all of it is relevant for operation state.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry, that was just a question about operations. I don't want to sidetrack your talk altogether.
No, so the point is actually, how do we work smart, right? Because the pace at which people are burning out, and people are very quick to understand a picture. And why I like Maro is because it's like that, and it's collaborative. So anybody can add post-it notes and be collaborative. The license fees of Maro are exorbitant. Microsoft, a month or 3 months ago, launched their whiteboard, which competes directly with Maro. In fact, I believe it might even be better in certain instances. It's free. It comes as part of the Enterprise 365 license. What is awesome is, and I can do a 101 if anybody wants to stay behind. It is amazing. And what is happening is people are building on and making comments throughout because you have access to it. And then it gets saved in your Microsoft suite automatically. If you create a whiteboard, it gets saved as a whiteboard folder automatically in your system. And then there's version control. If you lose it, somebody comes and starts deleting all sorts of stuff, you can reinstate a previous version. So it is extremely enabling and extremely collaborative. And that's what excites me, because when people are engaged and involved and being valued, they are committed. So a bit of the technology, Whiteboard and Maro, along with a sprint kind of approach, an agile approach, is a winning formula compared to the old, let's sit in meetings after meetings and just talk. We don't have time for that. Okay. Anything else? And thanks for your input there. Comments. Does this make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go for it, Caroline.
Yeah, no, and I think your point is exactly right. I think we have to have the right tools to manage the amount of knowledge we're supposed to have. And I agree with you. I think something I'm very pleased to hear about Whiteboard in Microsoft. You know what? I'm a big campaigner for, if you have Office 365, use Office 365. Don't go and branch out into a gazillion other apps, because you're just fragmenting your knowledge base, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
The only
exactly.
concern I have with something like Whiteboard is it structured enough to find that data again later? So you've got to be really good at tagging and making sure that you're able to understand that when, after your go live, you know, 2 years down the line, can you still find the service agreement you put in place with your suppliers that you negotiated through a gazillion emails?
Yes.
You know, it's that structure on top of the lack of structure. Like, so you've got to be agile and fluid and visual. That's great. But at some point, you've got to be structured as well.
Yeah.
Would it not be the way you export that document and file it? I don't know. I'm
Does
very
anybody export it,
interested.
and is there an agreed filing system? That's my point. Like,
Yes.
sure, maybe
Yeah.
you've got one person
Yeah.
in your project who's super structured and thinks about the stuff, like who's going to be around in 3 years' time, you know. And but my point is, do you have a filing system to help you to do that, or do you go and build your own, like,
Yeah.
file share or something, or your own Jira project, or your own whatever you need? And then someone else has to think like you in order to find the document, because there's no agreed approach.
So, I mean, that is another big bugbear of mine. The first thing I do when I go into a project is I say, where's the repository that we're going to save all the project documentation, and in what format?
Yeah.
It has got easier. Can I explain why? The
Sure.
way we're using Teams, okay, just one step back. We are so entrenched in using email to communicate. Now, if you've got a special team like this, a team for this particular piece of work, you create a team on Teams for that piece of work. Let's say it's DMO, okay? You establish a team, you invite all those people on the teams. Every single discussion, every single document, every chat needs to go in Teams. The files are automatically saved there, and that can automatically be exported when that team's redundant into its own a file that people can access. So we haven't adopted Microsoft Suite enough to understand the power. When Microsoft created Teams, they said this is the collaboration platform which does knowledge management. So you don't need to understand how somebody thought and their file structure. You just need to know one word that they would use. So upfront, you agree on the naming convention of those documents, and you adhere to that. And if you know one word, you can search within that Teams exactly what you're looking for. So now knowledge management, easy access to the right people is very powerful. I've worked with 2 organizations where they've truly adopted Teams, but we're always defaulting back to email. Does anybody in this group know that you can send an email from Teams? So where somebody hasn't adopted Teams and they're not really using Teams, but I've sent a whole story in Teams with a document. Now I've got to go and repeat this in Outlook. You don't have to do that. There's a functionality where you can send from Teams to Outlook for those late adopters. So we've got to use the tech. Whiteboard and Teams is so powerful to make our life easier. And I'm happy to share. It has certainly made my life easier. Let me not even talk about SharePoint. You know, when you're wading through emails or you're thinking, did I get this from Teams or did I get it from email or did I get it on WhatsApp? You know, where did Howard send me this picture? If we just understand how to work properly and how to leverage off the technology, that will never be a problem. But we need to agree up front on the way of work, and then we need to adopt the technology. So again, behavior change is a process. Yeah. Anybody want to comment? Just a show of hands, would anybody want to see the collaboration of Microsoft Tech, like Whiteboard and adoption of Teams and in one of the sessions? And it's not a Microsoft training course. What it is it's about driving collaboration to get the results we want. It's part of a change management. Okay, great. Howard?
I'm now not sure. Hands up, or if people want to ask a question or hands up, they're responding to you. Okay. I think there may be one person that put their hand up for a question, but I'm not sure.
Okay, if your hand's up for a question, so we got a positive response, so we'll maybe recommend that in one of the sessions, upcoming sessions. But who's got a question? The show of hands question.
I think.
Yeah, it's Lifu. I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, Lifu.
Yes, and sorry about that. I'm in a taxi now. From work. My question or my suggestion. Okay, let me start with a question first. Is it possible that one can get the recordings, because I was unable to listen for everything since I was traveling. I was on the road, so I couldn't hear anything.
Yes,
so,
so maybe just to share with you, and there are a few people that asked, the process that we do is once we finish with this, we stop the recording, and then there's a level of editing, because some things may have been said that are not that kosher or not too good and things like that. So we do a level of editing. Once we've edited it, we do a post on LinkedIn, and then we get people to just on LinkedIn to say, please can you share this link with me, and then we share it and we interact like that. So that's the process that we've set up. Debbie monitors that. She will interact with you and make sure that you get the recording.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, and I will really appreciate. Can you also please share all the necessary links here on the chat so that we can have them? Yeah, because I'm also struggling to hear you guys. The audio is not so good from your side. Can even tell by you can't.
We will get the video and everything like that, Lifo, and then you can look at it. It's on YouTube. You'll be able to look at it when you have some time.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Lifu. Thanks. Howard, would you like to add anything?
Lots, but I think
I'm actually done. I mean, you've spoken.
Patrick, you got a question?
Yeah, it's more of a small comment. I think I'm one fan of working smart. And one of the key drivers of that is it's managing expectations well up front. So in the context of whether it's a project or in anything, I think if the project lead does a good job to manage those expectations, then we can kind of set up the tone without compromising some of the key infrastructure which goes with proper project management. I think what Jake is touching on is very important, the documentation aspect, which allows us 3 years down the line to go back and query things either for auditing purposes or things like that. In the data environment, any information can be used to inform a decision. So if we don't have it in a space where it can easily be accessible and queried, it becomes much more tedious to go through those sticky cards we have on Neural or Whiteboard and try to synthesize that and derive meaning from it. Sometimes there can be distortions and sometimes there can be disconnections between those two. So for me, the solution is someone driving it from the managing expectation point of view, built in those time embedded infrastructure, which is still required for project management, whether it's documenting and things like that and reporting. We can't ignore any of those. It is frustrating, especially when you take on a new role. The person who did it was doing it on the fly, and now you also have deliverables. You're kind of forced to go on the same wavelength, if I may say. But we know somewhere that this is really unsustainable. It becomes the next person's problem. So we have to find a way to work smart and also retain the useful infrastructure that goes with project management, also in Agile. So if that can be achieved, I think some of these problems you're facing will disappear.
Yeah, you've spoken like a true Scrum Master, Patrick. All those objectives.
Okay, we've got two other questions. Donnie, can you share with us?
Yeah, I would like to also actually share an opinion, perhaps more than a question. So I've been involved in primarily data warehousing, also data quality and all of that now for about 25 years. And I've done, I think, plus minus 60 projects, a lot of them big banks and, communication and all of those cell companies and travel companies and everything. And I've been through quite a lot of agile methodology projects in the last number of years. And people often tend to misconstrue, what do you call it, the mistake, the agile methodology with taking shortcuts. So that quite often happens, and it skews your whole data project. I'm a kind of a truth person, saying that the truth, or the persuasion of the truth, will set you free, even if you never catch up to it. And we continue to try and do that by creating the perfect data project, whether it be a BI or some sort of a data science project. And people make mistakes. One small example of that is if you're trying to build an accurate model in data science, and you take the wrong set of data because it's just too much effort. Between the teams, they can't align the effort to get a new set of data, more valuable set of data, and you train your model on the older set of data because it's there. It might not be accurate at all to be applied to the new set of data, as things change. But the teams change, people change, and they go away. So how to manage all of this and bring together a culture that will stick, even if some of the team members aren't there anymore. And in 2005, I said to my then data warehouse or business intelligence manager, this is a cultural problem. We need to change people's cultures in companies. And he started laughing at me. He said to me, "You don't know what you're talking about. You want to take on the world." And that's basically kind of what it is. It is highly challenging, to actually get that done. And then the other part of the problem is also with keeping track of it. Like, we just developing so much content, with what you're storing, where, the documentation and everything. And I like this type of Microsoft approach where you're going to do everything in the same place. I've also liked Miro last week when we did that and started playing with it. But if we can get something established that will last, that will outlast us, the players, I think that will be a great help. And at that stage, I think we'll be able to say we've established, the proper culture to continue within. Just my 5 cents. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Christine?
Good insights there. Just a little point on the culture thing. In the old days, so I've had several presentations on culture specifics, Donnie. I'm not sure if you've seen any of them, but the bottom line is, it's complex because people have their personal culture, and then there's the organizational culture, and then there's the world culture. And everything plays with each other to create a certain subjective perspective. But if you're driving a data culture, for example, okay, data value culture, let's talk in context of that. That is, first of all, you've got to understand what value is. But value to me, being the business owner, and value to you, being the customer, and value to the data owner, the DMO, is different. But there is a common center. And if you align people collaboratively to see a common goal, you can drive the right behaviors, which then in turn result in the right culture. So it sounds complex, but it's not that difficult if you understand the game plan. And it's all about culture. I mean, in the old days, they would drive a high-performing culture, and that was all about performance. Now, every time they talk about performance, they talk about culture. Who are you talking to there, Howard? Oh, one of the... You're on mute, Howard. Oh,
sorry, yes, it's Razine, and you'll see him on Saturday.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. But we'll definitely arrange a session on those tools. It has been life-changing from a change management, people enablement perspective. It has really been one of those quick wins.
Yes.
Is your hand still up, Donnie? Is anybody else?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make this one last comment about that. I agree fully with you, 100%. On some things, we do have to, how can I say, force everybody into the same culture, if I can call it that.
Yes.
And my example that I always use, and people actually, some get annoyed with me already about this, is if people can just get used to using date formats the same everywhere, so that we don't miss the data. That's one small thing. It's one small example. But still people use dates wrong, and we get problems between systems, and that's a small thing, small issue, but yeah.
Then that's such a good point. It's like I said,